Should we be removing colonial era statues? Get your calls in now. 0207 862 2222 is the number. It's not the first time it's come up, of course. You may remember this moment in Bristol when a statue of slave trader Edward Colston was toppled by Black Lives Matter protesters back in 2020. And there have been protests against the statue of Cecil Rhodes in Oxford, a leading figure in the colonisation of South Africa. Now there are calls to pull down Robert Clive, known as Clive of India, who laid the foundations for the British rule of India in the 1700s. He is cast in bronze outside the Foreign Office. The Labour politician Baronness Thangam Debbonaire says having his statue there could harm international relations, especially since Clive was a controversial figure, accused of causing starvation. Marvyn, when you see these statues, what do they say to you? Somebody like Clive of India or, you know, Cecil Rhodes, perhaps. Yeah. Is it something that causes you offence?
I wouldn't say offence, but I think it makes me very aware that the harm that this country has done all around the world, and again, coming from the global south or coming from the Caribbean where that harm exactly was perpetrated, and especially in India, a lot of people get to tell those stories and the impact. I think what I'm deeply more uncomfortable about is the fact that we're whitewashing inherently the truth of what the impact was around the world. These statues are democratically being asked to be removed. They're not being pulled down. Nobody's standing there with a rope. So I think the question is a valid question. What do we do with statues? I think post Black Lives Matter, there was a period of, actually, we need to put the correct framing of these individuals next to the statue and not just make it out as if they did amazing good, but actually they did some nuanced and actually some horrible things. And I think that's a much better place to be in.
OK, well, we're going to get a little sample of what that might look like after the break. We're also going to hear from Dawn, of course. Should we remove colonial statues? 0207 862 2222, that's the number you need. We'll see you very soon. So let's get on to the question of whether we should remove colonial statues. It follows calls from Labour peer Baronness Thangam Debbonaire to take down a statue of British colonialist Clive of India, which stands outside the Foreign Office. Get your calls in. Dawn, let's come back to you.
Yes,
you know, what's happened to the Colston statue is really interesting because it's ended up in a museum, still covered in the graffiti, and that tells a story of how we look at that period of history and the way we see it now. That's as valid, surely, as if he was standing up there talking about times gone past, which are so offensive to so many people.
Well, is it? Is it really? I mean, I live in Tower Hamlets where we had Robert Milligan. We had a statue outside the London Museum of Docklands there. There's exactly the same story, slave trader, merchant, etc., etc. And that statue was removed and put in the London Museum, the London Docklands Museum. So you can still go and see it. And I agree with Marvyn, you just learn from the past and move on and make sure we don't make those mistakes again. But did removing the statue make any difference to the people of Tower Hamlets? No, the situation hasn't got any better in Tower Hamlets for people of colour, for poor children. It really hasn't made any difference.
I don't think that's why we're doing it. I think when you see a statue upright and prime of place in Whitehall or in Parliament Square, I think that's representing the country. When you see it on its back with paint on it, you see it in its context, and actually there's an arc of the story that is beautiful that you want to lean in to understand. That context makes me want to find out more about him versus that which just feels like
but the Edward Colston statue happens
celebrated.
To be horizontal, but most of them are perfectly upright.
But I think that's the call. The call is, what's the next phase? Or when you have a reflection period of 100 years and say, actually, the things you did were damaging and problematic and violent to a lot of people. What's the next stage for these statues, and who are the new heroes? There are great people who exist
who would you put
in society
now, Marvyn?
Of you, Dawn. But I think that's a really good, beautiful national question. People who have won Olympic medals, people who have genuinely invented things, those are the people that we should be celebrating rather than warlords and mongerers and slave traders.
Isn't there a danger that we forget our history, that those stories are actually erased, and like everybody, I'll give you some examples, okay? Right, one solution that we're talking about is contextual plaques. So on the plinth, we actually tell a little bit more about both sides of somebody that we have fairly uncritically looked at in the past. Let's look at Churchill, for instance. He talked about white people being a higher grade race. So he was a white supremacist. Does that mean, hold on, we've cut there, we need to go back to Churchill. Does that mean that we need to add to Churchill's plinth the word racist, okay? Because effectively, by modern standards, he would be called a racist.
Well,
he
I think
be called a white
even then he
supremacist.
was, but I think by all standards he was. I think contextualizing him, and again, we don't talk about Churchill in his fullness, right? The things that he did across the globe was really problematic. We speak about him from the war. He's a hero, untouchable as a conversation. And I think what type of country are we trying to be if we're just going to be white supremacist nationalists who only talk about our heroes through a narrow lens? Then we have every right from people who were invited here to contribute to Britain to say that we don't like it and we're not happy. Whether or not that you continue to take him down or not is up to you, but let's just be honest about what the relationship is between what the history of Britain is and the history of our countries that we came from, that we are now British citizens of. It's important to be honest about it.
I mean, if we pride ourselves in the UK about being fair and about being honest, Dawn, isn't it important that we reappraise people as a whole, not just for the 5 years when he was exemplary and led the country through the war?
We can't change the past, what happened in the past, for right or for wrong, and let's not forget this country did some very good things as well. We abolished slavery.
Name them. You did.
Oh, yeah, we did abolish slavery. We were the first country to abolish slavery, international Atlantic slave trade. We did.
You cannot say things like that and actually leave it as a sentence. You didn't abolish slavery. Slavery was no longer financially viable. But don't make it out like you did it as a point of humanitarian crisis and you did it for people. You did it because America was getting too rich from it, and as a result, you wanted to control the economics of it.
The point is that this country isn't all bad. It has done good things in the past as well. The point of the statues is we look at them, we can't change what happened in the past. Much of it was bad, but we learn from it and we make sure we don't
Have you learned from it?
We don't
We're still
repeat the same
interfering in
mistakes.
international governments today. There is still destabilising happening directly at the hands of British policy, foreign policy. So have we really learned from it? And as far as my view is look, the statues exist. I think we should contextualise them as the minimum. I think the greater question is, who are the people that we really should be honouring from the history of Britain? And most of these people are all related to slave, famine,
it's very
and oppression.
difficult to find anyone.
No, there are scientists, there are doctors, there are Olympians, there are
Okay.
sports personalities who all deserve. Let's get Jeff Hurst on there, and he can be somebody we celebrate.
Actually, yeah, maybe.
Okay. We're going to take some calls. We've got maybe another example I'd love to run past you. Sharon's in Essex. Sharon, should we start taking away these colonial statues that represent our colonial past?
No.
Go on, Sharon.
Well, basically, I do agree with the lady Dawn there. You can't change things.
You can.
And it's as simple as you can't.
Well, you can change
It's
things
in the
by
past.
removing the symbols of what's important to
No.
us and what we value.
No. They're there. They should stay there. And that's it. Bottom line.
Okay, but
And if they take them down, what are you going to put in replace of them?
well, you can leave them empty until you find somebody whose story
What
you
a
are
mess.
100% proud of.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, so you could have a blank, empty space, which I think would look worse. I don't know whether you agree. I just think they shouldn't be removed. And I quite agree with Dawn. As I say, you can't change the past. It's happened. It's gone. I mean, you can't change COVID. It's happened. It's gone.
Okay, but as we find out things about people and what they actually did, is there never a moment when you can say, that was unacceptable? We now realise that that was
Well, we know
something we
everything.
shouldn't be
We
proud of
know-
as a country.
Well, you know, everything is probably going to be unacceptable. But my question to you is, what are you going to do about it? What would you do about it?
What I'm going to do about it is talk about it on telly, so we can come to the right conclusion, Sharon. Let's take another call. Andrew's in Liverpool. Andrea, would you get rid of colonial statues?
Yeah, 100%. Because those colonial statues represent a time in this country when we were going around doing wicked things, and now we take them out moral higher ground, saying, oh, you know, keep them as you know, as part of history. But at the end of the day, that history wasn't good. And that history also, when we bring it to modern day, that is history. Our country went round destabilising other countries' infrastructure, and now we all complain because of migrants. But these migrants wouldn't be open into this country if our country had not gone over to their country and destabilised it.
Okay.
So really,
Andrea,
we can't really take the moral higher ground there. We really can't. And anyone who tries to take the moral higher ground in this type of situation can be deemed as a racist, because just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it's okay. And how come it took how many years to realise that wasn't okay?
Okay.
How could they not take the moral ground back then when they were going around enslaving people? How did they not know that was wrong?
Andrea, so what we're talking about, if we are going to erase the past in the way I think you're talking about, your line wasn't the clearest, that means knocking down the docks at Liverpool. All of the docks at Liverpool have to go, because that was the basis for slavery in this country. Liverpool was built on slavery.
To keep a history of slavery, which was wicked, totally wicked, just because this country, because I live in Liverpool, doesn't mean that I would say, oh yeah, we need to keep slave forts. No, I agree, yes, they need to go, because it represents a time in this country that this country should be ashamed of, not glorifying it. It's actually disgusting. It's abominable, the things that our country has gone around doing and still to this day do. So that lady saying, oh, we've learnt lessons from it. So have we? Can we take accountability, please, instead of still acting like we have the moral upper hand? Because we actually don't. When we actually look at the history of what our country has done, it's nothing to be proud of. It's nothing to be glorified. Can we take accountability for that? Because this country is very good at pointing out to other countries that they're not taking accountability, while we never, ever, ever do. This country has never said sorry to enslaving. Other countries, Jamaica, the Caribbean, Africa, we've never taken accountability and said sorry and given. If someone was to steal
Andrea,
I feel I fell in love with you a little bit as you were speaking.
is so passionately argued. Beautiful. Dawn, just to come to you, what Andrea is saying there is we do not stop and acknowledge the things that we've done wrong. We are so keen to acknowledge when we've won the war, for instance. We celebrate that every year. What about the moments?
World Cup was important, though, to be fair.
What about the moments when we do need to look back and say we got that wrong? We treated people badly. People lost their lives.
Our king has apologised for the mistakes that we made in the past with slavery. We have said sorry, so that isn't true. The king has said that.
He didn't apologise, actually.
Pardon?
He acknowledged, which is different. But go
Well, acknowledge, he said sorry. Yes, so we have acknowledged the mistakes we make in the past. We're sitting talking about it, as you said, live on TV. We are acknowledging the mistakes that were made in the past. And so we should move on and look to the future, a better future.
What is the future?
We do have to move on. You're absolutely right, Dawn, because I want your thoughts on this.